as
Recording in progress.
individuals using their phones are in one location and then they travel to a different location and they use their phone, we're able to see if mobility is happening within the country. And these data can be anonymized and aggregated in order to provide important insights on a number of things, but most notably into how populations move within a country. Next slide, Rachel. And we've seen, especially during the current COVID-19 crisis, how understanding population mobility is extremely important, both to understand how disease might spread and travel to other locations, as well as to measure how well policies that aim to limit mobility are actually working in terms of reducing the spread of the disease. So in this session today, we're going to have 4 conversations that will focus on some of the key messages and some of the key questions that surround the use of these data. Namely, what is the potential of the data? How can they be harnessed effectively? How do we address some of the ethical and regulatory challenges that arise when we use these data? And what is needed for the sustainable use? The conversations will include experts from all the different types of stakeholder institutions that are needed for successful use and application of these data. And each conversation will start with a poll question that we ask the audience to respond to so that we can shape the conversation around the opinions that currently pervade. And we hope to elicit strong participation from the audience throughout the session. So moving right into our first conversation and first poll question, there will be a link that you can go to, as well as a code, so you can see the first question, which is focused on where you see the largest impact of this type of mobile phone data, whether in the space of disease control, natural disaster, national statistics, social protection targeting, or infrastructure planning. And so while we ask you to log in and to put in your answer, I'll also go ahead and introduce the speakers that will be part of this first conversation around the potential of mobile phone data. So first we have Lamin Diba, who is Principal Statistician at the Gambia Bureau of Statistics, and Dr. Vivian Wananji, who is Director of Curative Services in the Ministry of Health in Tanzania. And to introduce myself, I'm Sveta Malusheva. I'm an economist and researcher at the World Bank. And maybe while I wait for everyone to put in their responses, and I think maybe we can also put the link in the Zoom chat so that everyone can access the link to the poll. Maybe we can actually go ahead and start with our speakers and hear a little bit from them in terms of what they think is the main area where they see the largest potential for mobile phone data in their respective organizations, as well as what are some of the data gaps that mobile phone data can help to fill. And feel free to also use examples from your own work in using mobile phone data in your organization. So starting with Dr. Wananji, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Wananji, as Sophia has just reported. I'm working at the Ministry of Health as the Director for Curative Services. But I worked at all levels of healthcare system, from the district level, regional level, but now I'm at the national level. So I would just like to contribute in relation to the potential and the largest potential and the benefits of the phone data. Working as a regional medical officer in Arusha, one of the areas that we thought that we could benefit from the phone data is in the epidemic control. There was a time, in Arusha we have Maasai population, and Maasai population, they are nomads. So during the outbreak, for example, like in the cholera outbreak, they normally move from one place to another place, one looking for pasture to gather water. So and at the same time, because the telephone penetration in the country is very high at the moment, or more than 90% people, they have phones. Even the nomads, they have phones as well. So we realize it's important to capture them, their movement pattern, so that they enable us to locate them in their locality where they are, and how can we fix the intervention. That's one of the areas that we do. But another thing that we did, we appreciate the collaboration that we had from the UN Foundation, but together with the Digital Impact Alliance, together with the Ministry of Health, Community Development, and EDLE. What we did, we actually used the Tanzania Electronic Immunization Registrar. So we linked up. It was a pilot study that we link up with mobile phone, able to track the immunization, and then we're able to track their pattern, like where are these children, when are they coming to access the service. So these data, I mean, they're useful in that way. But another thing that we can look at the same time is allocation of the planning process, because migration of population. For example, like one region that I worked, that is Moshi District Council. That place, in the afternoon, people they're coming to the urban town, but in the evening they go back to their setup. So you realize in our budget allocation formula, one of the indicators, 70% is population. But you can realize these people during the daytime, they are in town working, and then in the evening, they are back in their villages. So you realize that you allocate a lot of budget based on the population that they are residing in the rural setup, but in the actual sense, these people they're in urban setting. So using the phone data, it could help for the policymakers in terms of allocating resources, because we can move the movement of pattern from one place to another place. Coming to another area of the COVID as well, because one of the interventions that we're doing is to intervene the movement of people from one place to another. So coming with the mobile data also, it can be useful, at least to know these people, they are moving from one area to another area, so it would be easy to set some intervention. One area that I see is like a challenge, because it needs to involve different stakeholders. Like we need to have the regulators in place. We need to have the ministries and other stakeholders to be involved, so that to arrange everything to work smoothly. So in brief, that's what the potential I see in using the phone data. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Wananji. And from your side, Lamin, where do you see the largest potential, especially coming from a national statistics organization? Where are you seeing these data being most helpful, and what gaps are they helping to fill?
Yes,
thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Sveta, for giving me the opportunity. For the Gambia Bureau of Statistics, we initially planned to use the mobile phone data to measure internal mobility, because that has been a challenge for us when it comes to providing regular statistics. We only relied on the censuses to provide internal migration, and we had the belief that the mobile phone data had the potential to help us measure the movement of people within the country. And we sought the assistance of World Bank. So at the time, we were working on using the mobile phone data to measure internal mobility. And then the COVID came, so the focus changed from using the phone data to measure mobility to using that same data to track the spread of COVID-19 in terms of how people are moving, and then tracing the contacts. So basically, that was our focus. But then, at present, we all know that mobile phone data complements efforts in terms of real-time population estimates. We know that it could be a very good source of data in reducing the cost of population censuses, because once we are able to have a regular update on population densities, and then providing real-time population data, and the focus on censuses will naturally shift away from the overall population censuses to specific variables that would be difficult to update on a regular basis. That way we'll just focus on those ones and then use mobile phone data to regularly update population statistics. Maybe what could happen is during censuses we can only focus on growth centers that might be difficult to properly track, and this can be done by using complementary data from the satellite imagery combined with the CDR data to provide near accurate data on population. And of course, we look at the country here. We are currently, for the past 2-3 years, we've been thinking about constructing and developing the CRVs, that is the Civil Registration and Violence Statistics. And we know with real-time population update from the CDR data combined with the potential for satellite imagery, it could be a very good source to helping us develop a comprehensive CRVs. That way, we as a country will have better use of the data that we have been collecting over the years. Now we also know that we have a challenge of providing data to people when it comes to disaster. Anytime there are disasters in this country, sectors and individuals will come for requests, and oftentimes we don't have that data that they are requesting for. But with the mobile phone data and other complementary sources of data, we know we have the potential of helping the disaster issues to collect and provide real-time statistics on disaster affected areas. Now, there is one thing that we need to look at. With all these disaster issues, we don't have a way to timely assess or report on which areas are really affected. And we cannot also allocate or assign any area that we can say this is a disaster risk area, because we don't have the capability. But with the mobile phone data and combined with, like I said, the satellite imagery, we can have the potential to say, okay, these areas are disaster risk areas, and we need to properly deal with it. And this provides data to the policymakers, to government, to its development partners in making decisions about this kind of issues. We also know that when it comes to some socioeconomic data, for instance, the remittances and other macroeconomic indicators, mobile phone data helps in providing very good estimate when it comes to amount of money that is being sent, because once we are able to track the number of people that are doing transfers abroad based on the international call transfers, we have combined that with the bank, the commercial and then central bank data, we are able to provide some very good socioeconomic data that relates to the remittances. We also know we have a challenge in providing.
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much, Lamin, for so many different different use cases. I think it's quite a number of different areas that we can think about. I wanted to just go back to Dr. Wananji for 1 minute before we switch to the next conversation, just to make sure we have time, since we started a little bit late, but hopefully we'll have a little bit more time at the end as well to hear a bit more about some of these additional areas as well, and some of the challenges in terms of where you see yourself going forward. So maybe just very quickly back to Dr. Wananji to ask, where do you see the Ministry of Health going forward in terms of using these data, and any challenges that you foresee?
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. For me, I see not only obstacles, but I see an opportunity, a huge opportunity. Because one of the area that we can look at, globally now we are battling non-communicable diseases, NCDs. I see there's a huge potential in looking at mobility, because one of the things that we are looking at the mobility. People, they need to be mobile to move from one place to another place, not only using vehicle, but walking. Because if we could be able to get the data, at least we'll see the patterns of the people, their mobility in a day. So this one, it could be really, it could contribute to the policymakers as well in making interventions to address non-communicable disease. That's one in one area. But the obstacle that I'm looking at is the level of engagement at all levels, because everybody need to be involved, need to be on board for the use of the data to be realized. Because you could see that, like, not only for the mobile data, the data use at all level is still a challenge, from the primary level, secondary level, to the tertiary level. Still, we have a lot of issues with the data use. That's why, as a country, we came up with a roadmap we call data use DUP, data use plan. That is a 3 years roadmap to make more emphasis on the use of data. So the obstacle that I see is the low engagement. But if we're going to engage everybody at all levels, we see the huge potential of using these data for the betterment to get information, that information to use for the decision. But another thing that I look at is the area of the research, because this is because you could see there are many data that have been generated by one phone, almost 60 gigabytes in one phone in a year. So if those data, we can make a good use of it, we can analyze them and obtain some information, it will be a greater opportunity to better and to improve in our ministry. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wananchi. And that's a great segue into the next conversation that will focus more on how we actually operationalize and use these data. And so I'll turn it over to Lamin, who will lead the conversation on this topic.
Thank you very much, Sveta. We'll now start with a poll of audience to assess what each member of the audience thinks is the most important aspect of preparation for the use of mobile phone operators. Using the same Metimeter as before, please go ahead and submit your responses on the question displayed on the screen right now. And while that goes on, I'll now introduce the speakers of this second conversation, with whom we will discuss the next set of questions regarding collaboration, ethical issues, and other infrastructure. Here I have Tyler Smith, the co-founder and Chief Technical Officer of Cooper & Smith, and Javier Bolanueda, Director of Mobile Data Partnership at the Flowminder Foundation. Both speakers work for non-profit organizations that securely analyze mobile operator data for common good. My first question goes to Javier. Javier, can you please tell us about the different means of setting up collaborations and access routes that Flowminder has implemented over the years?
Thank you, Lamin. Yes, sure, would be pleased. So yeah, indeed, there's like a two dimension to it. There is the access route or technical approach, and then the type of collaboration model that we adopt. So in terms of the technical approach, at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, we thought directly, okay, we need to be active, we need to do something. And it's clear that we're not going to be in a position to support and provide data analytics support across the world. I mean, it's very long to establish this type of collaboration. So we had a kind of two-tiered approach. First, we shared the knowledge openly via a website on mobility analytics useful for the COVID-19 response, as well as a GitHub repository where some computer code was hosted, open source, open access, so that others willing to analyze mobile data to support their government could use this code in a robust and privacy preserving manner. So there's this first layer of technical setup, which was just like providing information. Then our second route is what we call the assisted queries. And here, what we do is that we work in close collaboration with a mobile network operator and train their staff over the course of a few weeks. Normally, it takes 4 to 5 weeks. It's 1 hour session, it's relatively light touch, in order for them at the mobile network operator to produce themselves some call detail record aggregates, anonymized, that we can then later analyze, turn into mobility indicator, and provide support to government. The third way is what we would call the classic Flowminder approach, and that was for COVID-19 only possible where this approach was already realized and in full speed, is where we have such a strong relationship with the mobile network operator that we have a server installed behind their firewall or virtual machine. So in country, behind the firewall of the mobile network operator, a server which is fed by their call detail record, de-identified. And we connect remotely to this server and we process this data with Flowkit, our open sourced and free software to process mobility data. And then we have a last technical setup, which is a Flowkit Plus. So same ID, server or virtual machine behind the firewall of the operator. And on top of that, we provide an external facing API, a way to connect, and send query, request, demand to the server behind without exposing the individual level data, but allowing the authorized user to obtain anonymous aggregated data out of the database from the mobile network operator. So in terms of collaboration model, as said, the first one was kind of agnostic, just like sharing information with this website, general on COVID-19, and then the GitHub repository with some of our codes, or rather the one which are just SQL based, so simple code. And then there's like various collaboration model, because there's no one size fits all solution. Each country is different. Relationships with the mobile network operator, with the regulatory authority, with the state agency, with the other ministry department and agency are different. So we have different model. And this collaboration model can be summarized as simply a collaboration with the mobile network operator only. And this collaboration allows Flowminder and the mobile network operator to produce analytics that can be shared with the government. Mobile network operator and a ministry department or agency, such as a national statistical agency, like the collaboration model in Ghana, or collaboration with a telecommunication regulatory authority, where the telecommunication regulatory authority has such access to the data. So that was a quick overview, few technical approach, and few collaboration models, so that we can really fit to the request of our partner in country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Javier. Now turn to Tyler. Tyler, how has COVID-19 helped you restructure your technical and ethical setup?
Thanks, Lamin, and it's very nice to be with you all today. So we've been working now for a couple of years in Malawi with a group of stakeholders, including the telecommunications providers, the regulatory authorities, and various elements of the government of Malawi, to test proof of concepts and work with sample data to really understand what's possible. I think COVID-19 served as a big catalyst to really deepen these relationships and think about how we quickly set up an environment that could handle that kind of volume for data, while at the same time ensuring privacy and security. And I think that was no small feat. As I'm sure many of you have encountered, there's not great governance frameworks in place in a lot of countries that specify how we should be accessing these data, what the precise specification should be for generating indicators, et cetera. And so we really had to take that on quickly and think about how we would meet the needs of an evolving crisis while at the same time ensuring that nothing slipped through the cracks and that there was adequate protections in place for these highly sensitive data. So I think COVID served as really a force for change in this area in Malawi. We were granted a number of special permissions from various government entities, including the Presidential Task Force, to continue to work on these data. We also were able to work directly with the telcos to implement a more frequent data gathering process. So getting 24 hours worth of data at a time, and then also implement some deeper cleaning algorithms within the MNO firewall that allowed us to ensure that we were getting information that was as close to usable as possible with all of the adequate anonymization in there. I think the other thing is that we took a hybrid approach to setting up the technical environment. As I mentioned, data were being processed behind the MNO firewall in order to strip any identifying features out of it. And then we used a staging server that was provided by the MNO, linked to a secure cloud-based environment that allowed us to process the anonymized data. And then we developed a set of restricted dashboards that were accessed only by key individuals within the public health authorities and government that allowed them to act on the information that was being produced. So in short, I think COVID-19 really highlighted the need for frequent and high quality data on population dynamics like we haven't seen before. And Malawi really rose to the occasion and figured out how we could absorb those data and factor them into our existing disease transmission models, as well as develop dashboards and tools for how public health authorities could respond. So I'm hoping that the gains that have made during this trying time really help to advance our structures in country and will allow us to continue to deepen these relationships going forward. Back to you, Lamin.
Thank you, Tyler. Just before you go, I have a question for both of you, but starting with you. What building blocks were in place that allowed you to quickly absorb and process the data for COVID-19 decisions? What were some of the obstacles? Then to Javier.
Sure, thanks, Lamin. So as I mentioned, we had done proof of concept in the country using a sample of mobile network operator data a couple of years ago. What that proof of concept allowed us to do was already assemble the core group of stakeholders that need to have a voice in the execution of these types of projects. So mentioning obviously the government, the end users of the data, the regulators, the mobile network operators. And so we already had those partnerships and relationships in place. And so we weren't starting from scratch with an idea. We were able to come back to these partners and say, we have a clear use case. Can we move forward in this way? I think the other thing is that we made it a point in the proof of concept to really document all of the technical processes, the scripts, the protocols for data transfer, et cetera, how the indicators are being generated. And so we had all that documentation readily available and we could call it up from the GitHub repo and begin tweaking and tailoring it for the unique applications in the COVID-19 response. I think some of the obstacles that we faced in trying to tailor the models for COVID included finalizing the parameters for the anonymized data. So particularly figuring out the sweet spot for how data were aggregated, for example, in chunks of time. And we ended up accessing data every day for 4-hour blocks at each of the geographic telephone towers.
Okay, yes, we seem to be running out of time. Just 30 seconds, Javier, can you just give us your response?
Sure.
Just 30 seconds.
I will try to be short as I'm the timekeeper of the next one, so it's on me as well. So yeah, Flowminder acted in many countries, Curaçao, Haiti, Ghana, Sierra Leone, DRC, Namibia. It's kind of a bit hard to say like one commonality out of this. There were like some really old relationships with everything set up, all the contractual agreement, all the regulatory agreement in place, all the technical setup, the capacity there, and some of the relationships were really new. So it was a bit, some difference. I mean, Ghana was probably the shining light here. Everything had been done in advance, really prepared, not having COVID-19 in mind, naturally, other use case. And there we had like a request from policymaker on a Friday. On the Tuesday, we were with Vodafone Ghana in a position to provide answer. So it's really key to have everything set up in advance. In terms of the obstacle, it's probably in some country we face some issue in terms of communication channels with ministry, department, and agency being set up in advance. Capacity strengthening on both sides, on the side of the mobile network operator, on the side of Flowminder, on the side of the ministry, department, agency, a kind of common language, protocol, and processes.
Thank you.
Stopping here.
Thank you so much, Javier. I'm afraid we are. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We have gone beyond our allocated time, and then I now hand over back to Rachel, translator. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to actually continue the conversation now, and we're going to go for the poll question. Is it possible to use data insights to address global challenges and still protect privacy? So please take your time to address this really sensitive question. And I'm going to take the opportunity for you to answer, to introduce a bit more the discussion. So now we have discussed how mobile operator data can be harnessed. We are now moving to the conversation on data ethics and privacy. I'm very pleased to welcome Angela Mansa-Poku, Director for Commercial Operations and Digital Transformation at Vodafone Ghana, and Zani Chimbe, Director of Legal Services at the Malawi Communication Regulatory Authority. Okay, so there are not yet, yes, it's anonymous, yes, for the moment. That's great. If I may play it back to you, Angela, what are your thoughts on the poll question? Is it possible to use data in crisis and protect data privacy?
Sure, thanks, Javier. I think I could be really controversial and say no, but actually yes. And I think that you alluded to it in your session. We were successful in executing this in Ghana through the Data for Good project. And I think that you highlighted the technical aspects of everyone coming together and being able to produce this output. But I think, let me just briefly give you an overview of what Data for Good is in Ghana. So Data for Good is a project that aims to use mobile-derived customer insights to make better predictions for sustainable development and life-saving decisions in Ghana, using aggregated and anonymized call detail records, or CDRs, with technical support from yourselves, Flowminder, and also Ghana Statistical Service. The project generated statistics for the aggregated and anonymized CDRs to support the way that we make decisions in public health, humanitarian needs, agriculture, and development planning. So as you know, I work for Vodafone, and Vodafone takes privacy very, very importantly. I mean, we are a customer-centric business, and we wouldn't do anything to compromise our customers' data. And we also hold that data to the highest standards. So we follow our regulation in terms of GDPR, and we make sure that throughout the journey, we were making sure that we were also very, very compliant with what needed to be done. Also, one of the other things that you mentioned was the flow kit. I think having access to that flow kit and using the flow kit, it meant that we were able to securely analyze the data. So we had no worries there around security, transparency, or privacy. Also, one of the things that I definitely want to mention from a Ghana point of view is that the data protection laws themselves do not inhibit the controlled use of data during a crisis. And actually, you can use the data for public good, but it sets out very clear parameters around what you can and cannot use it for and how you use data responsibly. So therefore, I think that all of these things together really, really helped us one, be able to use data in a responsible way, but also you mentioned it in your last session, Javier, was around the being prepared. It's important that you're prepared so that you don't rush into making any not well thought out decisions, especially around critical customer data.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you. Zani, what would be your take on this question? What are your thoughts on the poll question? Is it possible to use data in crisis and protect data privacy? And sorry for the lights that switch off constantly. My apologies.
Thank you so much, Xavier. I think I quite agree with what Angela has just said. And for me, I would say that the question is not that, is it possible? The question should be, should it be used in times of crisis? Again, the answer is yes. It has to be used. We know the impact and the benefits and the advantages that any government can actually achieve using accurate and timely data. And mobile data is one such thing. It does provide that necessary platform where governments or departments can actually have that sort of data, and that can actually help them to actually make evidence-based decisions so that the interventions that they actually take are well targeted. Like Malawi is one of the developing countries. We are always somehow short on resources. We do need to have targeted responses or interventions. And if mobile data can achieve this, yes, of course, it has to be used in times of crisis. The next question is, can we achieve this without infringing the rights, at the same time protecting privacy? Yes, it can also be achieved, and it has been achieved. In the last session, we had Malawian cases where it has actually been used in times of crisis during the COVID. But again, it had been used earlier on before the crisis for other health projects. That sort of like leveraged how data should be used. I should say the issue should always be responsible use, or data use during crisis. But otherwise, the question, it's no longer a question whether we can use it or not. It's something that we should. Let's just make sure that we have the right governance framework for it, and that we promote as much as possible the responsible data use so that there's no question of abuse. In the Malawi situation, as I said, we used it. We didn't have not even a single legal challenge or any public outcries concerning with infringements on privacy. So for us, for Malawi, I would say even my own opinion is that yes, it can be used, but it's just making sure that the right frameworks, the protections are always there right from the outset. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Zani. Going to have to ask both of you to be very, very short on the last question. As we started late, we need to catch up. And I would like you, if it's possible, to answer in 30 seconds. I had this task before, it's really hard. And what made your collaboration successful? Really short answer. And if we can start with Angela, and then Zani will be fantastic. Thank you. Angela.
Goodness me, Xavier, you're not being fair. But to make it really, really short, 4 things. 1, a good steering committee. Imagine having the private sector, public sector, non-profit together, everyone having a different opinion, but having the same objective. Having a steering committee that kept us honest and kept us to task is number 1. Number 2 is a well-defined project framework, knowing why you went into it and executing it, making sure that there wasn't scope creep, making sure that everyone was laser focused on the same thing is really, really important. So I think a well-defined project framework. Cultural differences, and I don't mean in terms of Africans, I mean in terms of working styles. So as I said before, you had public sector, you had private sector, and you had all these parties that wanted to ensure that, 1, their values were brought into the project that we were trying to execute. And so that's the reason why I would say this didn't happen overnight. It took us 18 months to agree on a final framework and made sure that we were ready for any crisis or any output that would need this data. And the last one is transparency. I think that all the parties involved were very, very clear that for people to trust that we were doing the best for them, doing the best for the data, for the good of the Ghanaian nation, for Ghanaians and also for the Ghana nation, we had to ensure that people understood what we were doing. So transparency was very, very clear. So hopefully that was 30 seconds. I'm sure
it was a bit more, but sorry, I couldn't hold myself and I let you speak. Sorry. Zani, please, may I ask you to provide your view and as well, 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. As I already had said, some of the highlights for us, major things was having an enabling legal framework. We had already a law, the E-Transaction and Cybersecurity Act, which already allowed such processing, especially processing data, personal data for public good. So this was something that was in the public interest. It felt around that particular legal framework. Political will. It was very important to have the political will, especially us as a regulator. Once we actually said the government always had to come to consult us if that was okay, if it's going to achieve what it was going to achieve. When we told them about mobile data and the advantages and everything, and that we are championing and supporting it, that sort of like paved the way. And again, transparency was also a very important thing. The people who are involved in the projects were very transparent and very generous with the information that they shared. And their willingness to always ensure responsible data use in terms of abiding by the data processing principles in the enabling framework, as well as undertaking that they're going to take technical safeguards, the anonymization, the aggregation, that also helped a lot. Again, the fact that we are doing it under a PPP, like everybody, the private, the public, we are all involved, and having a common goal also really helped. So I think these were some of the things that really helped our collaboration and dialogue. We kept on talking, interfacing. That also was key to our success. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Zani. I'm going to let the floor to the next intervention, to the next discussion.
I think that that's me. So I have the envious task of the last conversation for today. And we will focus on key elements needed for sustainability of mobile operator data analytics. And like the other questions, we would like to conduct a poll to get the audience's opinion. So may I ask you to vote and give us your opinion via Menti to rank the ways in which mobile data analytics ecosystem can be financed. And then whilst we wait for your responses to appear, I'd like to introduce you to our two panelists to discuss the importance of sustainability and preparedness. I'm very pleased to be interviewing Mr. Managzo Malawi, Senior Digital Health Technical Advisor for the Ministry of Health from Malawi, and Miss Annette Levine, Senior Digital Development Specialist at World Bank. This conversation will form the last discussion of our event, and we will then end it with a quick Q&A. So let's start. Let's see, can we see the Menti? And you can see, we'll come back to the polls. They seem to be changing. People are swapping places, but let's start with the first question. And I will go to Anat. And my question for you is, what are the challenges you see to sustainability of mobile data effort? And what are the things that, from the perspective of the World Bank, you would like to see in place?
Thanks very much, Angela. There are a number of challenges facing this effort and leading to why aggregated and anonymized CDR data is so difficult to access and to keep sustainable. A number of co-authors and I wrote a paper about this that was published just 3 weeks ago, and I think we're making the link available in the chat. But based on the experience of trying to access CDR data from 41 country cases that we had at the World Bank, and Sveta, who's on this panel, was also one of our team members, there are several challenges from those efforts of attempting to get the data in 41 countries that we can identify. So for one is every country is a different approach. There is a great variation amongst the ecosystem. That means that the partnership structure is different in every country. The regulatory structure is different in every country. The organizations are different, the incentives are different, capacities are different. And so you need its own custom tailored approach in every country. But what we need for sustainability is actually a very streamlined and pre-arranged, standardized approach. So I can give you a couple of examples. The level of corporate centralization and decentralization is different amongst MNOs. So some of them have an HQ and then country franchises. Some of them are just standalone country franchises. With each one of these structures, you need to approach the MNO differently to see how you are able to get access to the data. The decision-making between regulatory authorities and the relevant ministries, for example, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Communications, it's not straightforward in every context, and data protection legislation also varies across countries. So you have to figure out who are your contact points and how do you make this happen in every single country separately. Some MNOs prefer to analyze their own data and build their own analytical products. So you have a situation that in one country, two MNOs build different dashboards. The data have different definitions, different methodological bases. You can't combine them to get a picture of the country as a whole. And so you really need that standardization in order to make this effort sustainable. So what we have is common to all of this is the significant level of effort to align the stakeholders and the components that are necessary. There's also insufficient awareness of the value and cost of the data and a lack of investment in appropriate funding mechanism, which we'll also need in order to make this effort sustainable. So MNOs are generally motivated to provide subsidized access in a sudden onset humanitarian emergency. And they're generally amenable to absorbing the costs for this. But for steady state access for non-emergency development work, there's a challenge in that there's a significant perception gap between MNOs and the development community as to the value and the pricing of the data. So MNOs view the mobility data as their commercial asset, and there's real costs associated with collecting, extracting, processing, hosting, and protecting the data. The development community, on the other hand, is used to getting data pro bono. And they expect to they come to the table with the expectation of paying nothing at all or subsidized wholesale prices. So for one to be sustainable, we need to establish the conditions and criteria by which these data are provided free of charge in an emergency setting. And we need a clear path forward to figuring out how do we define what the cost of this data is? What's the value of a unit of this data? How do we set the standard for pricing for nonprofits? So how do we set a standard for development use cases that are not commercial rates for the path forward?
That's great. Thanks, Anna. I just want to bring in Maganzo. Are you there? Awesome. I think that it's time to bring it to life. I think that it would be great to get your examples of what you experienced and what your challenges that you've seen in Malawi, and also what did you put in to actually overcome it?
Thanks, Angela. I'm Maganizo Monawe, working for the Ministry of Health in Malawi. So we have used the MNO data for a number of use cases. I think the first one was just to understand, like, the MNO data be useful in health service delivery. The most recent use case is was around COVID, when we analyzed and we produced some products to support with the COVID response. In this process, I think we had some experiences which somehow can be identified as challenges. So I think first, about the issue of security and the privacy. There's security assurance that needs to be done, the identification, and that takes time. I think there are solutions to make that process much easier, but as of now, for use cases that need real time, almost near real time, it's difficult to do that because you need a process to prepare the data to make it ready for use. So I think that is one key issue that needs to be worked on in the case of emergency and the pandemic. I think the other issue is the infrastructure. As we said, MNO data is a lot of data. It's a true definition of big data. So for you to be able to process that data and to be able to transfer that data, as it is now, where the data is sitting and where it's going to be analyzed, usually it's two different places. And our infrastructure, to be able to manage that, there's a limitation. I think it took us about 2 days or so to transfer 5 terabytes of data to the processing instance. So I think these are some of the issues. I think one of the area speakers talked about how we can use the MNO data in the estimation of population, but also we should, they noted that you need other sources of data in order to triangulate the accuracy of the MNO data, like if you're using to estimate the population. So I think that's also an area. It means we can use the MNO data, but not everyone has a phone. So for us to be able to be sure about the figures, we need other sources of data. So I think these are some of the experiences and challenges that we experienced in the use of the MNO data.
Awesome, thank you so much. Maganizo, please accept my apologies for butchering your name twice. But we will stay with you just in the last few moments. My question is, what is your singular advice that you would ask people to focus on when you think about sustainability of the mobile data effort? So I would like your concise words in the next 30 seconds on what your singular advice would be.
So I think we developed a very good use case for use of MNO data around the COVID. But at a certain point, we couldn't implement it because of privacy concerns. I think the understanding in terms of how the public will receive such innovation. So I think one of the key issues as we are working on the MNO data is how we do public awareness for the population to understand that their mobile phone data can be used without compromising their security. I think that has to be clear. Possible to use your data without really compromising your privacy, because I think that's also a major bottleneck in the use of the MNO data.
Fantastic. And Anat, can I get your closing comments, please, in the next 30 seconds?
Sure, thanks very much, Angela. I want to leave everybody with 3 messages from this session. Preparation, preparation, and more preparation. So what that means is when Ebola hit, we were not prepared. We all recognized the importance of this data for the use of tracking people's mobility and figuring out where they were for Ebola and getting help to them in their location. And we started doing some one-off pilots and projects, and we learned a lot from them, and they were all very excellent. But we did not scale up yet, and we haven't standardized yet, and we're not prepared. So when COVID hit, we were still not prepared to reap the benefits of this data. So I'd like to suggest a bold vision going forward. We really need to be prepared for future emergencies, and then we can also reap the rewards for steady state development use cases. So we need those pre-approved templates for licensing and data sharing agreements. We need those to be adopted. We need to develop widely adopted protocols and regulatory levels. And we need leadership on a predefined set of indicators for prioritized use cases. We need flexible regulation. We need to build trusted relationships now, because we don't have time when an emergency hits to build those trusted relationships. We need to build capacity now. So what I would like to do is call to everybody. We need to build that ecosystem. We need to figure out the financing. Everybody needs to pitch in. Everybody needs to do their part. We need those ecosystems built in the countries, and we really need everybody to roll up their sleeves and help us get there. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great call to action there. Thank you very, very much to our panelists. I think that was it. We were actually on time, so well done. And on that note, I will pass this on to Sveta, who will take us into Q&A. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Angela, and thank you so much to all the participants. Unfortunately, we are quite over time at this stage due to some of those technical difficulties at the beginning. So maybe if there is a quick question, we can take it, but otherwise I don't see anything in the Q&A chats right now, either on the app or in Zoom. But I would like to encourage everyone to reach out. I think one of the really great things about this session was that it really did bring together all these different stakeholders who need to come together if we are going to achieve the vision that Anat has laid out. And so I think we want to see this as the start of a conversation that hopefully can continue so that we can work together to prepare for the next crisis that may come along. And so I would encourage everyone to reach out. I think our contact information should be available in the website, in the WOVA chat. So please reach out, and hopefully we can see this as a start. And next time we can come together and show much more in terms of what we've been able to achieve and thinking about the sustainability of the use of these types of data. And if anyone does have additional questions you'd like to post in the chat, we can also stay on for longer, but I do recognize that people may have additional meetings that they need to run to. So again, thank you to all the speakers, all the panelists, and thank you to everyone that attended the session as well. We're very excited to do this today, and we're very excited to continue the conversation as well.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.